The hostages of fear. Why some people are more afraid of the world than others. Welcome. The jazz of psychology brings you a dose of psychology and everyday life mix with a twist in baseless fear. The thing about fear is that it has various reasons why people are afraid of something. For spiders, it's usually due to their looks that some are afraid of. For other things, it can manifest after a negative event, even if before then the person did not have that fear. Like driving a car after experiencing a car crash. There are many other examples, but that's not the point now. What we're talking about here is a learned, but not experienced fear. Usually due to someone else having a negative experience with that something and relaying it to the other person. Think of older people and children. The correlation usually goes like so. The longer the years lived, the more experience one has. Hence their knowledge is more valid. Just because, give it a moment. We're talking about relaying experience, especially a negative one, of a one single individual as something objective, and that it should be taken as the utmost gospel truth. Why? Just because. As an example, think of the 1998 movie The Waterboy with Adam Sandler and Kathy Bates. The mother uses fear to control her slightly intellectually challenged son to be afraid of the world, because she does not wish for her boy to get hurt, which is understandable. However, there are better ways to do it. Not the point here now. The point is that the child believes his mother to be absolutely right, because the information provided comes from a very influential on the child's life source, the mother. That is why the boy grows up believing in the things he does, until shown otherwise. The psychology behind this scenario is that it is possible to learn a baseless fear when it is provided from a powerful source, especially if the source is somebody older, more experienced, and considered wiser. The biggest problem with the learned baseless fear is that it can probably, most certainly will, become a hindrance later in a person's life. But it is not and will not be perceived as such, because it is the holy truth and therefore it cannot possibly be wrong. A real-life case study will explain more in a moment.
When the world is a scary place because it was taught to be so. This is a real-life example of a learned, baseless fear that has no ground besides having been taught and is utilized without being recognized as a problem. A person can be afraid of many different things. The way people become afraid of things varies from person to person. In some cases, it can be a learned, baseless fear, told but not experienced. For instance, when a guardian will tell a child to keep their guard up 24/7 because evil lurks on every corner. What does that entail, exactly? It means that the child will grow up to be afraid of the world, because bad things can happen at any moment and thus, one should be always prepared for it. What that creates is a constant state of subconscious fear, also can be called as paranoia, making the person say and do, at the times, rather ridiculous things without them even realizing it. An example of such would be of a young woman, in her 30s, visiting a beauty salon. Because she was taught to never let her guard down at some point, she assumed that her hair stylist, who is a heterosexual male, will sexually assault her. In the middle of a hair salon, with other clients and staff members present, and with no secret doors or passages anywhere in sight. It is only fair to mention that no assault took place that day. Or any day. Otherwise, this case study would be much more like a Sherlock Holmes case. What made the woman consider harassment in the first place, you ask? She mentioned how the stylist leaned in a little closer to ask her a question about what length the cut should be while washing her hair. Apparently that was the signal to sound the alarms inside her mind. It's no surprise for a woman to be afraid of sexual harassment or assault. The terrible things do happen. There is no denying it. However, perhaps not in the middle of a prestigious hair salon that's booked weeks in advance, in the middle of a work day? A single hairstylist is no Weinstein. If even one harassment case had occurred at some point, the whole salon would have been shut down ages ago. And yet the woman proceeds with her beauty treatment in battle-ready mode just in case. After a few additional questions, it was revealed that after certain life events, which probably became the groundwork for the weak mindset, that the young woman had been raised by an elderly female guardian. The guardian had used her own previous experiences as objective facts to teach the young woman about life. One of which was, every man is a scoundrel that will hurt you. It's understandable to teach children to be careful and not to talk to strangers and such, but this isn't the type of a situation. This is a case of a weak mindset and its perception of the world as it was taught. Which begs the question, would the young woman have felt more at ease if it were a homosexual male that was styling her hair? Or does the emphasis lie on the male part only? Either way, the point remains. The woman was taught to view males as a threat. The setting for the threat was never specified, which is one part of the problem. The rest lies with the young woman's own weak mindset that does not question the truths taught, hinting at a lack of analytical skills that are an indication of a weak mindset. Everything is related. Of course, the situation could have been worse if the woman had acted on her assumption. No need to cry wolf if nothing is happening. However, even if nothing happened, it already did enough damage to the person's mind, because the mind now is on full alert, straining itself needlessly even more. When a person grows up to believe every truth that they are told as objective knowledge, it is a sign that the person's mind did not mature properly. As a result, the mind remains in a childlike weak mindset, making it easier for the fear to control the person and their life. The side effect of this: the mind is in a state of constant standby, fearing that something might happen at any moment, thus exhausting itself, which in turn impedes on the other functions of the mind. Sadly, the person who is controlled by such a fear does not recognize the problem as a problem. In cases like these, it becomes rather difficult for the person to not exaggerate life events or listen to reason. The mindset does not change even if nothing scary ever happens to the person. All because the fear is so deeply rooted into the mind of the person. This is the end of the case study.
Welcome back. Now then, in reality, it's a bit different. Because the teachings passed down are only one person's bad experience, or an accumulation of multiple outside experiences. This problem occurs when personal experience is perceived as objective knowledge, meaning that if it happened to me, it will most definitely happen to you too. Well, of course, if doing it with the same kind of a mindset as the other person. In other words, if doing something with fear as the basis for the action, then the outcome most likely will be a negative one. Kind of like trying to pet a dog while being scared out of your mind about doing it. Dogs sense fear. Sometimes they will react to it rather aggressively because they sense the intensity of it from the person. And out of pure instinct will display an aggressive behavior, which will be perceived as a dangerous attack on the person, which is not the case at all. The dog only reacts aggressively to fear because it does not know the intentions of the person in question. The dog only senses the strong emotion, the fear, and is reacting to it, rather than the intention, the possibility of pets. Of course, if the dog's owner shows the dog that everything is okay, has a good relationship with their pet, and the dog trusts their owner, then no harm will come to anyone. Now let's take a look at the same situation from a different angle. What if the person trying to pet the dog loves them and is not afraid of them, but the dog is timid instead? For the sake of the argument, let's say that the petter has prior knowledge on how to correctly approach the dog in this situation, without causing the pooch any additional distress, even if the dog, for whatever the reasons, is afraid of people in general, but is approached without fear and carefully still, then no harm would come to anyone as well, as long as the people around the dog would remain calm too. Due to their heightened senses, dogs react to their surroundings quicker and sometimes more intensely, which can be problematic if lacking the right know-how. But on that another time. Alternatively, even if one person, who is madly afraid of dogs, participates in the petting situation, even from the sidelines, and an injury occurs to the petter, the I told you so will most definitely follow suit. As a result of that, the fear will only intensify, causing the person to boast about being right about everything from the start. Now let's circle back to psychology. When a person is afraid of something and is of a weak mindset, they tend to display two crucial signs: trust issues and fear projection. We'll discuss the fear projection right now and save the other one for later. When a person is afraid of something, they tend to project their fear onto the rest of the world. For instance, "Don't swim too far, you'll drown," says someone who does not know how to swim, regardless of the fact that the person who wants to swim can and is not afraid to. Same thing happens after a tragic event is witnessed, like seeing someone drown. Sometimes it doesn't even have anything to do with their personal experience. Sometimes their fear for a specific factor is based on other people's negative experiences. Because number one, those people experienced it. Number two, had a negative outcome. And number three, are now afraid of that. Going by that logic, a weak mindset thinks to itself, "I must be afraid of it as well, because that's what happened to those people." Who are those people? What connection do those people have with the person? And why should the person be afraid? Who knows? The strength of fear is directly related to the impression it has left on the mind. The weaker the mind, the bigger the impression. Why? Because a weak mindset is prone to scare tactics and a strength in numbers mentality. If one is afraid, then we all must be. Simply because. Which can backfire miserably, but about that another time. The main point here is weak mindsets usually stem from some sort of mental development impairment. In this particular example with the learned fear, it is that the nurture had impacted the newly developing mind with scare tactics. Why did it happen? Because telling a child to be afraid of something is easier than trying to explain it properly so that the child can learn how to think and choose for themselves. This usually happens when small children are underestimated by adults due to them being small and children who don't know any better. Of course, they don't if nobody ever took the effort of explaining to them so the child can understand. When people are afraid of the world because they were taught to be, they are unable to teach otherwise themselves. They never truly learned anything for themselves, but rather were simply told how to think and feel. As a result, they are only able to relay their own personal experiences as objective knowledge, which with age has become their solid understanding of the world, and should be taken as such, no questions asked. With the help of psychology, it is possible to learn how sometimes scary things are nothing to be afraid of, like having a tiny cuddly puppy held, instead of facing a big, scary dog nose to nose. The process is called desensitization. It works for people and pets. It's a bit difficult to be afraid of the boogeyman if it's a Mike Wazowski, right? The lack of an ability to question the reality of things is what separates a weak mindset from a strong one. No, this is not the philosophical case of to be or not to be. This is the question of providing and/or obtaining the necessary survival skills the right way for the sake of one's future. You have reached the end of this post. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for more and remember, mental health is important too. Take care.